KPBS Evening Edition is made possible by Joan and Erwin Jacobs and by
Hello, good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Dwayne Brown. 10 days from now, construction is expected to begin in Carlsbad on what will be the largest desalination plant in the Western Hemisphere. Poseidon Resources says the plant will open in about 4 years. Once it's up and running, it's expected to generate 50 million gallons of drinking water from the ocean every day. County Water Authority says it was able to sell construction bonds for the project at a lower than expected interest rate. That means water from the plant will be less expensive than originally planned. The new year will bring tough new rules for personnel at Marine bases. Starting January 1st, Marines and sailors at Camp Pendleton and other bases will be subject to random blood alcohol tests twice a year. If they have a blood alcohol level of 0.01% or higher, they could be referred to counseling. Anyone testing at 0.04 or above will be referred to medical personnel to see if they're fit for duty. The Navy says it will introduce mandatory tests next month as well. A new state law requires carbon monoxide detectors in many condos and apartments. It applies to units with appliances using fossil fuels. Carbon monoxide is the leading cause of accidental poisoning in the U.S. Devices like this could someday help people avoid unhealthy air. Researchers at UC San Diego have developed portable pollution monitors. They're the size of about 4 iPhones stacked together, and they use a smartphone app to measure pollution in real time. Researchers say they hope to use the monitors in San Ysidro, where officials are worried about pollution at the world's busiest border crossing. Just one more game left in the Chargers football season. There's been a lot of speculation it'll be the last game for the team's head coach, but Norv Turner says he's not really thinking about it that way.
I'm going to enjoy the week in terms of we come back in Wednesday morning and start preparing. And obviously you're playing a division rival. You're playing the Raiders. So, we just get everything we can out of this week, enjoy each other, and then, we'll see what happens.
The Chargers' record is now 6-9. They finished the season at home on Sunday against the Oakland Raiders. As 2012 winds down, we take a look back at some of the biggest stories of the year. Peggy Pico begins our retrospective with our Fronteras team.
Immigration and our region's relationship with Mexico generated lots of local stories in 2012. Joining me to talk about those stories are our Fronteras reporters, Adrian Florido and Jill Replogle. Adrian and both Jill, you have been so busy this past year, but let's start with you, Adrian. Give us a little summary of what's happened as far as immigration reform in 2012.
Well, one of the biggest stories of 2012 came over the summer when the president announced a new policy to deal with young, undocumented immigrants who had arrived in the U.S. as children by no fault of their own. Their parents had brought them, but who nonetheless had undocumented status and so couldn't, for example, go to school, get scholarships, get jobs. What the president announced over the summer was called the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals Program, which basically was a kind of a policy tweak that would allow people under the age of 30 who arrived before the age of 15 by no fault of their own and had gone to school, allowed them to stay in the country temporarily for a period of 2 years without fear of deportation, and also to get a work permit to allow them to have jobs for the first time in their lives legally here in the U.S. So this was an important kind of step forward in terms of this large movement of immigrant activists who have been trying to get the U.S. to adopt kind of more modern sort of ways of dealing with the large undocumented immigrant population. This obviously dealt with just one small portion, which is young undocumented immigrants, but they see it as a step in the right direction.
There were some other steps made, and Jill, in Mexico, the war on drugs. How has this past year compared to other previous years?
Well, if the numbers, and the numbers are always in dispute, but if we sort of continue on the path that that the year has taken, it's probably going to be the first decline in deaths related to the war on drugs in the past 6 years. About 18% is what the most recent estimate that I've seen. And violence has definitely been down in Baja on our border, also in Chihuahua where Ciudad Juarez is. So in a lot of the border areas, they've seen a decrease in violence. A lot of that violence has moved to states more inland in Mexico, but overall, it seems like things are getting a little bit calmer.
Certainly, many of your stories actually have talked about this sort of apparent decline. But Mexico also elected a new president this year. What is he saying about the drug war and kind of what he might be doing coming in 2013?
He did a pretty good job of not making it his main focus during the campaign, probably because it's sort of a losing topic going into the elections. But he basically has not said that he's going to make any major changes from what the previous president did, but he is saying that he's going to focus more on violence, on preventing violence to ordinary citizens, and some are interpreting that as that he won't crack down on the cartels as hard as Calderon, the last president, did, as long as they, keep the peace. So we'll see what plays out on that. People are happy that he's has that focus. And then we'll see what happens with legalization here in the States, because the fact that Colorado and Washington just voted to legalize marijuana definitely had an impact in Latin America. And Peña Nieto, the Mexican president, says that he's against legalization, but he's also called for a reevaluation of the whole drug war strategy, because if we have legal marijuana here, it's hard for Mexico to know how to deal with that on their end.
Certainly, it'll change some of the dynamics going back and forth. Adrian, let's come back to the immigration reform. Anything coming up as far as in 2013 that you see as sort of things we should watch or monitor that you expect to be happening?
Well, the biggest story the morning after President Obama's re-election was the fact that the Latino community, the Latino population had been sort of critical, instrumental in getting him re-elected, right? And this was a big wake-up call for the Republican establishment in the country. They realized that if they want to continue to be a relevant party in American political society, that they have to start reaching out to Latinos. And so this was a realization that they made, and Republicans are suddenly serious about doing something about the immigration sort of problem that the U.S. has. And so immigration reform has become a top priority in the sort of legislative year ahead, and it's going to be very, very much a top priority for both parties to get some kind of comprehensive immigration reform done. I think another interesting story to watch in the next year is going to be the way that this key piece of legislation, Obama's healthcare reform, is going to intersect with possible immigration reform. Because if nothing happens with immigration reform, then once Obama's healthcare reform gets implemented, the only real population within the United States that's going to still be uninsured is going to be the undocumented population. And so it'll be interesting to see how these two kind of pieces of legislation interact in the coming years. So that's something we're going to be following pretty closely on the Fronteras Desk.
All right, a lot of good stories. Certainly in 2013, we'll be looking forward to hearing from both of you, Fronteras reporters Adrian Florido and Jill Replogle. Thanks so much for giving us this wrap-up.
Thanks, Maggie.
Tonight, neighbors in Newtown, Connecticut have lit luminaries in memory of those killed in the school shooting earlier this month. Those victims are being remembered here in San Diego as well. More than 24 trees remain on display in Kearny Mesa. They were put up last week. A tent's been put up to protect them from the wet weather. Life can be challenging for kids who live in a wheelchair, and finding adults who understand what they're going through isn't easy. A nonprofit group in Del Mar has launched a program called Role Models, pairing these kids with a disabled adult mentor. KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg says it's all about getting kids to see what's possible.
This promises to be a special day for 10-year-old Jerlina Bailey and her mom, Traylina Thomas.
So don't scream. So today we're going to go spend the whole day at SeaWorld and with your role model. You're just going to follow her around. You guys are going to get to talk and spend time together. I think that's pretty awesome. So it'll be just me, you, and your role model. That cool? Okay, now you can scream.
Thomas has something else to say to her daughter.
I know it's been difficult for you because you're around everybody who can walk. And I know that it's hard for you. So mommy entered so that way I can get you somebody that's more like you and can explain to you that you can be anything you want to be. Same thing I tell you every day.
For Jerlina Bailey, going from room to room in her small apartment is a struggle. let alone getting ready to leave for the day.
I need you to grab me a couple diapers and some calves.
They're panties, thank you.
Excuse me, your panties, please.
When Bailey was 4 years old, she was hit by a car as she was crossing the street. She lost her eyesight and hearing on her left side, her ability to walk, and control of her bladder. You might say she lost her independence. Bailey tries to stay positive.
You need some oil, or some new rims, or some tip oil.
We'll probably just need a whole new wheelchair, huh?
Bailey and Thomas finally make their way outside. Bailey says she's looking forward to meeting her mentor.
I'm looking for her to understand where I'm coming from. I'm looking for that she knows how she feels, and she knows that it's uncomfortable for people just to look at me. And I cry because I'm like, why do people look at me? Have you ever seen somebody in a wheelchair before? Like, how is that hard to understand? And maybe she'll get it. And I'm pretty mad at that man. He only got 2 years in prison, and I got the rest of my life in a wheelchair. How fair is that? Red night almost went down.
At SeaWorld, the Role Models program gets underway as 7 kids and their mentors get acquainted.
I'm looking forward to see the sharks.
Role Models is operated by the nonprofit group Head North. The program is designed to give kids with disabilities someone who can help them navigate through life.
There's questions that come along the way about how they're going to relate to their peers in certain situations with sports and with school and things like that. And they need somebody to talk to that about. You know, they want somebody else who's been in that same situation to just share their wisdom with.
I'm excited to be here because I haven't been here since I was 10.
Bailey's mentor is 32-year-old Jennifer McCaulson. She broke her neck 12 years ago in a cheerleading accident. McCaulson admits since then she's had her ups and downs, but she says she's also learned that attitude is everything.
We create our own destiny, you know, and I think it starts in your mind. And you know the saying, you are what you eat? I think you are what you think. And no one can tell me what I can and can't do, only myself.
Bailey likes that philosophy, and she shares some of her wisdom with McCaulson.
You can't go back and you can't rewind what you did. You gotta keep going, and you can't let that life in a wheelchair stop you.
I think that's all the advice I need.
Well, I think they pretty much left us, so let's go.
And we're gonna watch Shamu, we're gonna have lunch, and then we're gonna do the pet show.
The pair head off to explore the theme park. There are a couple of planned activities, and then
you and I can do whatever we want. Hey yo, we're the boss. I know, tearing it up. Then we're gonna rule the schools, sister.
And I'm gonna be like, I'm in a wheelchair.
We can go bowling for people. How about that?
Yeah, I think we'll get a camera and we'll just roll it at people. How about that?
That would look pretty funny.
Bailey and her mentor make their way to the Shamu show.
I'll give you a nudge if you need, okay?
Bailey has a little trouble on the final stretch.
Go hard left, hard left. There you go. There you go. You got a hard left. More on the left. You got that. No, you got it. We're almost there. You got it.
Bailey and McCaulson eventually grab some spots and enjoy the show.
You want to go right here? Perfect. Here we go.
The good times continue at lunch. As Bailey and her mentor enjoy each other's company, Traylina Thomas steps back and takes a deep breath.
For a mom, it's very difficult to see your own child struggle. And to see someone come in that has the same disability and that can push her to go beyond. I don't know if you caught her going down the hill. That was her first time doing it all by herself without my help. Made me feel so good. Like, oh my gosh, so good that I don't have to be there every step.
Everybody look.
Someone else can show her, you know, that they can do it so she can do it, you know?
Look right here.
I'm Jeffrey Brown. On the next News Hour, the latest on the growing gun control debate in the wake of the Newtown shootings. That's Monday on the PBS NewsHour.
The Weather Service says we'll get a Christmas Day reprieve from the rain, but just for a day. Tomorrow will be partly sunny along the coast, but the rain will return by Wednesday. Temperatures will also drop down more than 10 degrees for the inland areas and near the freezing point in the mountains by Wednesday night. The warm spot will be in the desert, mid-60s and partly cloudy. Port of San Diego is getting ready to welcome back a landmark that got mixed reviews. A copy of Unconditional Surrender will soon be installed on the waterfront. Workers will start preparing the site in the next couple of weeks. The previous version of the so-called kissing statue was on loan. The new installation will be permanent. Earlier this year, the Old Globe Theater premiered a new musical about the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. Allegiant set box office records for the Old Globe. It starred George Takei, best known as Star Trek's Mr. Sulu and a social media superstar. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando has more on Takei's legacy project.
Gaman is a word.
When the new musical Allegiance went into preview performances last month, it was still being tweaked, says book writer Lorenzo Tioni.
It's like archaeology. It's like a story is down there, it lies down there, and you just have to dig it up.
What I have learned in sort of unearthing the story of the internment is that a lot has gone unspoken for 70 years.
That's composer Jay Kuo.
The Japanese American culture would sooner bury the indignity and the shame than speak about it, and that was the way things were for decades. And it wasn't until generations had passed and people began asking more questions that these stories started to come out in greater force.
Stories like those of George Takei, who was 5 when he was taken to a Japanese American internment camp.
My most vivid memory, I think, is that day when the soldiers came marching up, 2 soldiers came marching up our driveway. They had bayoneted rifles, and I remember the glinting of those bayonets. Stomped up our front porch and banged on the front door and ordered our family out.
As a composer, Kuo writes in the language of music and always saw the story as a musical.
What music does is liberate the spoken word into the emotional. And the emotions that are buried underneath the things that haven't been spoken for so long are so intense that the music allows them to come out. And so lately I've been saying, well, how could this story not be told in music?
And for Takei, it was important to look at a time when the nation faltered.
I think we learn more from those chapters than we do from the glorious chapters that we have plenty of. And the internment story is still little known and even less understood.
You know, I knew about as much about the internment as pretty much any American, which is very little.
Mark Aceto helped write the book for the play. Actress Lea Salonga says schools do little to inform students about the Japanese-American internment.
There are a lot of kids that are saying, I read a lot of stuff on Facebook, and they're like, we only got one paragraph of this entire abominable experience to this entire community of people. 4 to 5 years of what is incarceration in an internment camp. How do you encapsulate that in a paragraph in a textbook? You can't.
Even Kuo, who was a civil rights attorney and worked on cases involving the internment, felt he could learn more.
What I hadn't experienced was sort of on a personal level, a lot of the personal stories. And so I find myself drawn in by diaries and poetry and things, art made by the internees, incredible things that needed to be given voice.
Something Takei felt was long overdue. But the tone of the play may surprise you with its humor and hope.
Yes, it was torturous and harrowing at times, but people still fell in love. They got married, had children. So there was joy. You can't survive something like that it with all grim suffering.
Because the reality is there were moments of lightness and life just happening, within the confines of barbed wire fences.
It was a doom and gloom situation in which they managed to bloom where they were planted, and it's enormously inspiring.
The internment was more than just a violation of civil rights. It raised a divisive series of questions within the Japanese American community about where one's allegiance lies.
When this happens to you and your family, where does your allegiance lie? Does your allegiance, for example, lie with the country that did this to you? Do you still pledge allegiance to the United States, even if your due process and equal rights have been violated?
For Takei's father, the answer was a resounding yes.
My father used to say both the strength and the weakness of our democracy is in the fact that it is a people's democracy. It can be as great as people can be, but it's as fallible as people are.
This was an event that fractured the Japanese American community 70 years ago, and it's still fractured today. I think that means to me that it's these wounds are not completely healed, and that all of the things that we're talking about are still relevant.
Allegiance is groundbreaking, not only for its subject matter, but also for providing Asian American actors with an opportunity to break out of stereotypes and play multidimensional roles.
Everybody of Asian descent who was doing the show, it isn't lost on any one of us how big of an opportunity and how wonderful of a chance this is to tell a story like this one.
KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando Takei, and his team are now working to bring Allegiance to Broadway. Well, if you're home for the holidays and looking for something out of the ordinary to do, you might want to go see the last North American tour for Cavalia in downtown San Diego. It's described as a magical encounter between human and horse. Cavalia's first visit to San Diego was in 2004, just after the show's initial debut 10 years ago. It's now been seen by more than 3.5 million people worldwide. Think Cirque du Soleil with 50 horses and a multimedia production with live music, high-flying acrobats, death-defying stunts and tricks, and ballet-like performers virtually walking on thin air. The show originates from Quebec, Canada, and was created by one of the co-founders of Cirque du Soleil. But well before the performers come to town, it takes 150 people just to erect the elaborate tents and distinctive big top. Currently staged near Petco Park in downtown San Diego. It takes 3 weeks and lots of manpower to set up one of the world's largest touring tents, but the real driving force behind this show is horsepower. The 50 horses in the show represent 11 different breeds, and they're truly the stars of this equestrian extravaganza. We took a tour of the stables under the large tents where every horse is showered with one-on-one attention from head to toe.
It's actually the largest traveling tent in the world, besides our sister show, Odissea, which now has a bigger tent than us.
Spencer Rose is one of 2 performers in Cavalia from California's Central Valley.
Hi, beautiful.
Look who's here. Hey, what's going on? So this is Tad. This is the horse you use for your trick riding, right?
Yes, this is. He's a quarter horse, and he's been doing it for 5 years, and he's 12 years old. All the horses get grained every day. The horses have a special diet they're on. He gets different amounts of food. He gets a different type of grain, and each diet is built for the horse.
So he's built for running and
for the trick riding, you know. He holds me when I hang off the side. You know, kind of like people. Different people are built for different things.
Spencer Rose was built to ride horses at an early age. She grew up in Exeter, California, near Fresno, and actually learned some new tricks performing with Cavalia. So there's a real rhythm to it all.
Oh, yeah. When I was 12, I used to have to do timing, so I had to sit like this.
But you haven't seen anything yet. This show is all about the human bond between horse and man. And one of Rose's favorite stunts is the tail drag, or hanging off the back of the horse.
And all my trust is in him at this point. I have to trust him to move and not to hurt me. And this is all abs right now. I am holding myself up by my abs. So it's fun. Get the hair a little dirty every day.
After 12 tours and 400 performances under her belt, I guess you get used to turning in a circle without getting dizzy. And if riding a horse upside down isn't enough for you, try spinning to lasso at the same time. Her cowgirl trademark.
And the most important part, the cell.
Cavalia has been wowing crowds in San Diego since November, and it's extending its stay until January 6th, downtown, next to Petco Park. And the next stop for Cavalia will be the land down under, Australia. Rose says they spend 4 to 6 weeks in every city they perform, and San Diego is one of her favorites. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/Evening Edition. Now, Evening Edition will not be on tomorrow night. We all here wish you a Merry Christmas, and we'll see you again on Wednesday. Good night.